this lesson, we will be able to identify a function when we look at mapping diagrams, graphs, and tables. After we do that, we will be evaluating these functions using our calculators. So, what does function in math mean? It is a relation between input and output. It is where each x has its own unique y. If it is a function, the x's cannot repeat. And that's going to be very important to remember for this section. So we have this little table that will help us remember how to determine if it's a function or not. If we're looking at mapping diagrams, we need to check the x values. We need to make sure that for each x, there's only one y. For graphs, we are going to use the vertical line test. And I'll go through examples here shortly. I just want to make sure that you're writing this down so that you can refer back to it. Okay, and then for tables, we are going to be checking the x values again. We're going to be making sure that they're not cheating and not repeating. The x's are not cheating and they're not repeating. So again, for a relation to be a function, it cannot have cheating or repeating x's, and it must pass the vertical line test. Okay, so let's look at our first example. This is a mapping diagram. Okay, we have our x's on one side and our y's on the other. Our cheat sheet tells us that we need to check the x values. Okay, so we have -1, 0, 1, 2, and 8. And we're checking to see if only one line is coming off of each x. So each x has only one line coming off of it, and it's going to 1 exactly y. So that checks out as a function. Now the next one is not a function because it has a repeating x. That 0 is cheating, and it belongs to that -2 and to the 1, and we do not want that. So this one is not a function. All right, now we're looking at graphs, and our little table tells us that if we're looking at a graph and to determine if it's a function, we're going to use what we call the vertical line test. What we do is draw multiple vertical lines, so that's going to be up and down. We're going to draw a few on our graph, and if any of the lines touch the graph more than once, then it is not a function. All right, so we're going to be drawing a line here, a line here, and then that line that's already drawn. Okay. And once we draw that line, if it touches our graph more than once, then it is not a function. This line touches our graph one time. The second line touches our graph only one time. And then our third line as well only touches our graph one time. So this one is a function. Okay, now I'm going to do the vertical line test on the second graph. I'm going to draw a line here and here. Okay, this one's kind of easy to see. Once I drew on that first line, it touches the graph here and there. So it touches it more than one time. And that's why it is not a function. All right, now we have tables, and these will probably be the easiest for you to see. Again, we're checking the x values, making sure that they do not cheat, they do not repeat. So let's go through each table. Our x's are here and our y's are here. Okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's no repeating x's, so this is a function. And the second one, our x's are 1, 2, 1, 3, 4, and 5. So this one is not a function because our 1 repeats here and our 1 repeats here. And that's supposed to be a 5. All right, I have 6 more examples, and I kind of mixed them all up. So what I want to do here first is off to the side, make ourselves a short version of our cheat sheet. And I strongly suggest that you do this on your assignments and any quizzes or tests. It will definitely help you out. So here off to the side, I'm going to write mapping x's, graph, vertical line test, and table x's. So example A, this is a graph, and our little cheat sheet tells us that for a graph we need to do the vertical line test. So let me just make the points more noticeable. And notice how these points aren't on a continuous line. So we are going to have to draw in several lines that will go through all of these points just to make sure if this is a function or not. So my first line is going to be here, that touches once. Second line is going to be here, that touches once. My third line is going to be here, and that actually touches it twice. So that line A is not a function because it does not pass the vertical line test. Okay, so now we have a mapping diagram. And for the mapping diagram, we need to check our x's. Do they repeat? Do they have only one y? So we see that -7 is going to that -1. That -2 is going to the -4. I'll go ahead and trace the lines. And then that 0 is going to -1, and that 5 is going to -9. So each x has its own y. So that one is a function. Okay, the next one is a table, and our cheat sheet tells us, again, to check the x's. We want to make sure that there's no repeating x's. So our x's are -2, 0, 4, and 8. There's no repeating x's, so that one is a function. Now notice that the y's are repeating. They're all ones, but that's okay. We only care about the x's. The x's cannot repeat. Okay, we have another graph, so we need to do the vertical line test. I'm gonna draw several lines here. 1, 2, 3. Okay, does it touch our graph more than once on each line? Touches it once here, and once there. So it does not touch more than once, so this is, again, a function. Okay, our next one is another mapping diagram. We need to check our x values. We need to make sure that they are not repeating. Remember, your input is your x's, and your output is your y's. Okay, so let's check our x values. This 0 is going to that -2, and it's also going to that 1. So right off the bat, that one is cheating. That's a cheating x. We do not want it to go to more than one y. So this is not a function. Okay, and let's just double check the other numbers. 1 goes to that 2, 2 goes to that 1, and then 3 goes to that 4. Okay, and the last one, we have a table. Again, your inputs are your x's, your outputs are your y's. And our little cheat sheet tells us on when we're looking at tables, we're going to be looking at the x values. We're going to make sure that they're not repeating or cheating. Okay, so we have 3, 4, 5, 4, and 10. Okay, notice how this 4 is going to the 7. It belongs to the 7. And this 4 also belongs to the 14. So this one's not a function because it is cheating. So we can represent our input and output in different ways. And now we're going to move on to how to actually evaluate functions. So function notation looks like this, and we read this as f of x. This is just another way of saying y equals. So all of this really reads y equals 3x plus 1. And the reason why we do this is because there's going to be times where we're looking at multiple functions at once. So we use function notation to be able to differentiate between them. So we can have f of x, g of x, and h of x, but they all are just fancy way of writing y equals. All right, let's look at our first problem. It says evaluate the following functions. And the first one says g of x equals 2 over 5x plus 5. And then it says find g of 25. notice that the 25 is in the same spot where x is on g of x. Okay, so if this whole thing is y, the question that you want to be asking yourself when it says find g of, and then it has a number inside the parentheses, if this whole thing is y, what is the y value when x is 25? Okay, so again, what is the y value when x is 25? Okay, so like I said earlier, if you notice that 25 is in the same spot where the x was, so that means wherever you see x, we're going to plug in 25. So let me write this out and show you what that should look like. Okay, it should be g of 25 equals 2 over 5. And we're going to put in parentheses, instead of that x, we're going to put 25. Close the parentheses, and then plus 5. Okay, so I'm going to show you two ways that we can evaluate these functions. I'm going to open up my calculator here, and I'm going to plug in exactly what I wrote. I'm going to plug in the right side into my calculator. So I'm plugging in 2 over 5, and then parentheses 25 plus 5, and that gives me 15. So remember, our question was, what is the y value when x is 25? Well, when we plugged that in into our calculator, our answer was 15. So in this case, g of 25 equals 15, which you should really be reading it in your head or actually this means the same thing as y equals 15. And we could also graph this function and trace to find our y value. Okay, so this time I'm going to type in the whole equation, the whole function. So g of x equals 2 over 5, and then x, and then plus 5. Okay, so we see our graph here, and I'm going to take a screenshot of it.